We're talking to Dr. Brian Thomas about the young Earth theory, and he's from the ICR Institute. And by the way, we highly recommend taking your family, your kids to the ICR Institute. It's really fun. It's a great museum. I was very pleasantly surprised. I don't know what I was thinking it was going to be, but it exceeded my expectations.
Absolutely, yeah. It was definitely more than what I expected for sure.
One of the things that we found out there was that you guys are doing actual science. You're doing scientific research, and one of the really cool things you're doing is looking into. It's not even, you guys don't refer to it as evolution. It's adaptation, right? Isn't that's a better word for what happens with us?
Sure,
we adapt to our surroundings and our environment.
Plants do, animals do, we do too.
Humans do all the
and
time.
you've got some research going on with fish that is fascinating that they showed us when we were there a couple of weeks ago. Tell us a little bit about the adapting that fish, the cave-dwelling fish, do.
Sure. Researchers have been studying these blind cave fish, the Mexican blind tetra, you could call it that, since the 70s. And we've all been fascinated by how did this sighted surface creature with pigment, etc., looks like a minnow, I guess. Mm-hmm. How did it enter? When did it enter caves? In central Mexico, and when did it go blind?
Because it's living in darkness,
living in total darkness, and have no pigment. And now, evolutionary dogma that I was taught and believed for a long time, of course, would say that this happens over slow and gradual. That was Darwin's insistent doctrinaire position. It's got to happen slowly and gradually by the accumulation of trait differences. And then later biologists said, well, that's got to be mutations. So we call it the neo-Darwinian theory, which means it's mutations is what gives us the differences. So in other words, it must have happened eons ago, and it must have taken eons,
right?
Many, many, many generations for these fish to lose their eyes, and in place of their eyes, they have gained this increased pressure sensors, they have sensitivity, and chemical sensors. So chemosensory, and the brain is reorganized to more efficiently process all those different data points coming in. Instead of coming in from an optic nerve, it's coming in from other nerves. So how do you make sense of all those data, sensory inputs? And anyway, so now the other hypothesis that we're trying to test is a creation-based idea. It's actually more along the lines of engineering. In fact, we're thinking at the Institute for Creation Research in terms of engineered biology, such that the Creator, which the Bible identifies as the Lord Jesus, would have outfitted the progenitors or the original fish with a suite of options that could be deployed in later generations.
As needed
or as occurs. And so that's what we're trying to test. So one of the predictions of our model would be that the trait could be deployed rather rapidly. We're not bound and constricted to a slow and gradual deployment process. And so what we have is fish tanks, and we're trying to expose cave fish, which we have, to surface conditions to see what changes might happen. And
we don't have 100 million years, Doc, to make that happen. I don't know what you're planning on doing.
Isn't it fun that we can do this kind of research because we have a different mindset? Mm-hmm. So our secular colleagues wouldn't even start this experiment, would they? Because they're locked into thinking that this takes a long time, period.
Yeah. And what are you guys seeing with these fish?
Oh, man. So we were expecting maybe 6 generations down the line, we'd see some sort of changes start to happen.
Yeah.
But in the adults, now these are adult cave fish, which have no eyes, no pigment, very little pigment. They're pink. And they've been that way, breeding that way for countless generations.
Right.
Hundreds, maybe thousands of generations. They look the same exact way. And within 30 days, pigment starts to show up.
Wow.
Incredible.
And within 45 days, they look like surface fish. Now, they didn't regenerate eyes, but who knows that they might not, or that they might, in some number of generations. And these fish,
but they are adapting. I mean,
yes, but they're doing it. They're doing it because
they're doing it fast.
Fast,
like you're talking days and maybe 2 months.
And it must be because they have sensors.
Yeah. Something's built in there.
Engineered
to
biology.
allow that to happen.
Engineered biology really explains what we're seeing. They have sensors that are tracking, there's a lot of sunlight or UV radiation, and it's doing DNA damage to my skin. I better protect this skin by deploying pigment to protect my DNA and my skin.
I'm really curious about how secular scientists are responding to that information. Do they know about it?
They don't.
Oh, they don't know about it.
This is fresh.
Yeah. Can't wait till that gets out.
I know.
Because I'd love to hear a response. What do you think of that? Huh? Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
No doubt.
Okay? That's great.
Yeah, and
Fun.
And you said just now that they can't see or they haven't developed that yet. Was there something on the tour, or am I just misremembering that there was some sort of optic activity that had started to happen? Right?
Yeah, even all these blind cavefish, as they develop from the egg, they begin to develop eyes.
Jeez, that's really something.
They begin to, but then at a certain point in their development, the eye degenerates, what they call degenerates, and then they deploy this eyeless version.
But again, you've been experimenting on these fish for 100,000 years-ish, somewhere in there.
And you're running experiments both ways, right? You're taking the surface, putting
So
them
we're
in
exposing
darkness.
We're exposing the surface fish to cave conditions, and it turns out that the most significant cave condition, and I'll reveal this to the world. This came at great cost and great expense. So this information that's pretty useless, but is the acid. It's acidic in those caves, and so how do you swim in acid? You have to deploy some.
Should be toxic, right?
Should be, and it is, and we can crank the acid down, the pH down, to where these fish don't make it. But you can anyway. But they do deploy acid. Combating physiological measures. Wow. They increase the size of their blood cells. They change their gill structure, even as they're adults. So it doesn't take multiple generations to do some of these things. It probably will take generations to do others. So it's an ongoing experiment. But that's what we're curious about: is do we see evidence that we need millions of years or multiple eons of slow and gradual accumulated mutational changes, or not? Or does this happen rapidly? And are these fish were these fish engineered to detect their environment and to deploy trait variations that will thrive in those various environments?
And of course that's the case. Of course God gives them the ability to adapt. Of course.
I mean, we see it in humans.
That shouldn't be a surprise to us, but somehow it does, because we've been secularized to believe all these other things, that it takes, 2 million years for that to take place. When in fact you did it in 45 days. That's amazing.